The dial is the most important aspect of any watch. Well, except for the person wearing it. A Rolex won't stop you being a buffoon, will it? The dial, or face, is perhaps the only part that can make or break a watch's visuals, and a great one can help mask the piece's other deficiencies. For several years, I'd say that's been the case with the highly popular Seiko Presage Cocktail Time. These mid-tier dress watches have bang average specs and bland, cheap case finishing, which you'd think would be a recipe for disaster. However, they also have exquisite dials that basically carry the whole package. I mean, just look at this thing. Is it any wonder why people forget the downsides? For the price, the Cocktail Times are pretty special, but that's not to say they satisfy everyone. In fact, for many in the watch community, the uncharacteristic large diameter, the boring bracelet, and the measly Hardlex crystal were enough to cut the Cocktail Time from their shopping list, despite its beauty. What if Seiko didn't cheapen out on those other areas though? What if they actually gave you a classically sized Presage with a sapphire crystal, a wearable band, and a dial just as good, if not better? Well, you'd probably end up with something like this. This is the new Nova 2 or Nova 37mm from Zelos. That's right, Zelos. Or is it Zelos? The same brand that brought you big-ass tool watch designs like this, this, and this. Now, in truth, I have no idea if the creator of these had the Presage in his crosshairs. Probably not, but the final result is uncannily similar. It's a retro-inspired dressy design with a slim case, available in a range of highly elaborate dials, and at a reasonable sub $1,000 price point. The blue version in particular immediately reminded me of the Presage. I'm sure it does for you too if you've seen that one. Okay, these Zelos watches do cost a fair amount more than the Seikos, but that makes sense if they've got better specs, right? When Zelos emailed me asking if I wanted to review this, these same sorts of questions flashed through my mind. Could this be the perfect void filler for those after a snazzy dress watch without the Seiko's downsides? Does it even look as good as the Seiko in person? Well, all the watches I'm mentioning today are linked in the video description. Let's find out. Right out of the gate, I was in for a treat. The watches arrived in this very high quality triple watch travel roll, which is worlds away from what even the more expensive Seikos ship in. While packaging isn't a crucial element by any stretch, it's nonetheless nice to have a storage solution with a great deal more practicality. So here they are, the Nova 37mm in teal and salmon, aka blue and pink. Thanks to Zelos for providing these review samples, hence the paid promotion flag. They're fine with me saying whatever I want about these watches as per my usual requirements, and they haven't paid me any cash to say anything. Each of the watches in this collection have slightly different dial arrangements, so I picked the two I thought looked the best. The first thing that hit me, aside from the dials, was the smell. Indeed, I got this major whiff of leather as soon as I unboxed these, which is usually a pretty assuring sign. There are no plasticky trash tier bands present here, as each of these shipped on a black Horween leather band by default. Horween being a super famous tannery dating way back to 1905. Their stuff is still top notch to this day. These straps are perfectly supple, perfectly flexible, and I'd imagine perfectly durable in the long run. While the company is old, the straps do have modern quick release spring bars, so you can switch them out easily if you don't like them. My sole complaint with them is that the custom Zelos buckle appears to be the same angular oversized one as used on their other watches, which completely clashes with the elegant styling of the Nova 37mm. Its brushing doesn't match up to the polished case, and overall, it's a bit of a baffling oversight in my books. A more streamlined buckle would surely be the way to go. Despite it, these watches, they still blew my socks off. Given that these cost like 700 quid, I was, of course, expecting them to look good. I mean, it had better look good for that much, yeah? But yeah, these honestly look like they cost way more than that. Now, I'm not sure how the Seiko dials are manufactured, but these Zelos dials are engraved using CNC machines, basically fancy cutting computers, which gives these patterns a much more three-dimensional look than even the Cocktail Times that I've reviewed. The cutouts, especially on the salmon one, are much deeper, and the resultant light play is something very special. They aren't just cut nicely. Both options retain the same sheen as a traditional sunburst watch, so you get this jazzy, sparkling effect as you move them. Zelos has experimented a great deal with dial materials and finishes over the years. I looked at the Eagle 2 on my unboxing channel, which also had some interesting things going on. The Nova 2s though, they look super premium and luxurious. There's no other way to explain it. Part of that is down to the case. Now this is very restrained by Zelos standards. Proportionally, it's got the whole classic dress watch theme on lockdown. It's exactly 37mm wide, with a similarly compact 43.8mm lug-to-lug measurement, meaning the watch is ideal for average and smaller arms, or those simply after a retro hit. What's even more ideal is the thickness. At under 9mm including the pretty high crystal, and about 7.2 without it, this watch is one of the thinnest I've ever reviewed, especially for a mechanical timepiece. In fact, the unusual flush fit caseback is the flattest I've ever seen, giving the watch an immaculate on-wrist profile. If your sleeves get stuck on this thing, your tailor is the one at fault. Both are a dream during usage. They certainly make a statement, no doubt about that. It fits my 6¼ inch wrist fairly well with no overhang, and the size truly suits this design. You big-wristed folk have always had all the fun with the Presage watches, now it's our turn. The rest of the case is more reserved, with a glossy finish throughout, though the indented two-step lugs help contribute to the Art Deco vibes present. It's simple, yet sharp and appropriate. This sleekness is, in part, due to the choice of movement. In here is the ETA 7001, a Swiss hand-wound movement that initially hit the market all the way back in 1971. I mean, how have I not come across this sooner? It's a mere 2.5mm thick. This mechanical gem is thinner than most quartz modules, and it also looks much prettier, as you can observe through the exhibition rear. From what I can tell online, this storied movement has a great reputation, though I couldn't find any reliable information about its accuracy. You'll see on screen the accuracy per unit for these two. I know lots of other brands opt for this movement when they want something slim, but I think it's the ideal choice for the Nova 37mm. Beat rate isn't so much of a factor with this one, as the second hand is far from prominent, tucked away in the subdial at the bottom center. Perhaps this is a good thing though. While clean and stylistically fitting, the hands are nonetheless simplistic and potentially the weakest part of the Nova 2, well, except for the clasp. The second hand in particular is just a flat block, which doesn't exude quality. Meanwhile, the complete absence of lume isn't exactly a surprise given the early 20th century design cues, but it should definitely be noted if you plan on picking one up. My main pain point with previous Zelos watches, aside from their extreme designs which sometimes strain to garishness, has always been how their applied detailing is done. I think the metallic trims they use on various parts of the dial tend to look cheap. I'm not sure exactly what you call them, but I'm referring to these bits here. To me, the Nova 37mm marks the first time I felt that the detailing actually suits and positively contributes to the design. These smooth, rounded borders are perfectly juxtaposed against the aggressively cut dial textures. Even the numbers, constructed in the same sort of manner, are presented in a tall Americana typeface that seamlessly slots in. What's even more pleasing is that the logo, which I'm not very fond of, has been downsized and repositioned to the foot of the dial, leaving the upper half completely clutter-free. As you can tell, legibility is still far from this watch's strong suit. I don't think it's as bad as some videos make out. A lot of creators seem to rely on very small light sources, which create a harsher contrast, causing these elements to disappear completely. Nevertheless, even under more flattering light, the salmon version in particular remains tricky to read at a glance. Despite this downside, I frankly don't care. In fact, out of the two, I feel more drawn to the salmon, which boasts easily the classiest pink tone I've seen on a watch. Together with that texture, it feels so unique, so niche and specialized that it instantly became my favorite dress watch, no question. Up close, this guilloche type pattern is probably the most comparable to that on the new Citizen Ciosa Small Seconds, at least out of the watches I've reviewed, as the size also increases the further outward from the center you look. Nevertheless, there's much more of a glisten this time around, furthering the dressy aura. And it's a shame because I don't think the camera fully captures this one. If you can see this one in the flesh, definitely do so. The pattern then transitions to a flatter area at the chapter ring. While the minute track is just an extension of this pattern, it's spectacular. I'll be whipping this watch out at the first opportunity I get. Unfortunately, us YouTubers, we don't get out much, but at least I know nobody else in the room will be wearing a watch quite like this. While still very elaborate, the teal version has that blue cocktail time-esque sunburst with striking deep radial grooves. Because of the darker tone, legibility is less of an issue here, as there's a slight fume effect present too, with the blue descending to a near black at the edges. I think this marginally more restrained dial is likely to appeal to more of you watching this video. It still oozes sophistication, offering up more defined rays of light on the dial, though the distinctiveness of the salmon still edges it for me. I bet a couple of you will think this is tacky. Texture for the sake of texture, maybe gone a bit too far. And I definitely get that perspective. As I alluded to earlier, normally that's me too. But here, I think Zelos has struck the balance just right and nailed that landing. This watch is not meant for people who want something conservative, that's clear. It's surely meant for those of you who want to spend out on something that will get comments and ideally compliments. Due to the extremity of the design, I think this is one of the very few watches that might actually be able to invoke that level of curiosity from people. The friends and family that I've showed this to have all been very impressed. The most comparable Presage to the Nova is probably the lesser known 38.5mm version. That one has a similarly numbered retro design, as well as a textured dial. I haven't tested that model yet, and that may be a good budget alternative to this, though I doubt it rivals the finesse of the Zelos Nova 37mm. So yeah, they're all linked in the video description. Highly recommend both of these watches, regardless of the price. You know, they're not dirt cheap. If you're on a tighter budget, here's my review of the 39mm Seiko Presage Cocktail Time, because there's a reason Seiko can get away with their bang average specs.